Hi, I'm Dr. Nancy Niemann, Assistant Superintendent, and with me here today is Chris Littlecook, Director of Title VII. One thing that we'd like to really speak about today is impact aid. We've had several questions about what impact aid is, how it affects our district. It's a very confusing topic, but we're going to talk about it and make it understandable for everybody. So Chris, you deal with impact aid on a regular basis.
Yep.
Could you tell us what it is?
Well, I'm in charge of submitting the application each year. And what impact aid is, it's a program that brings tax dollars that are not collected from certain households into the district. It started in 1950 because after World War II there's an influx of children into schools who have military parents who, for reasons, because they were in the military, didn't have to pay taxes. And so the schools were having to educate them, but they weren't receiving funds to carry out that mission.
Mm-hmm.
So they created this program to fill in those financial gaps for the school districts.
So basically, for our audience to understand, property taxes.
Correct.
The schools, that's our ad valorem taxes, our property taxes, that's what we're funded on. That is how we receive money for our general fund. But there are certain individuals, certain areas that do not pay property taxes. And the way I understand, Chris, that would be anyone on federally funded land, which includes Indian land,
Right.
military land, or low-income housing properties.
Right.
So there's three areas that do not pay federal property tax because they're federally funded property to begin with. So in those situations, people that live there are not paying the ad valorem, the property tax, so we're not getting our money.
Correct.
Okay. I know there are certain areas, military people, military, like Middale, where they have Enid, where they have military bases, they have quite a bit of impact aid because those large facilities with a lot of people living on them are not paying property taxes. But yet they still have children, students that enter the school system just as we do. So where do we get our impact aid here in Ponca City? We don't have a military base.
Right. Our student count comes primarily from those students living on Indian land. And last year we had 130-something kids living on Indian land, and we had over 50 kids living in town in low-rent housing.
Okay.
So our count primarily comes from those two areas.
So from Indian land and low-rent housing.
Correct.
Okay. About how much a year is that?
Well, in a perfect world, it'd be a lot of money, but impact aid, it's been around since 1950, but it has been underfunded since in the 60s. So, and they created a prorated formula, and so when it was underfunded, it's been underfunded ever since then. If it was fully funded, Ponca City, based on those numbers I gave you, would receive close to $900,000. But since it's not funded that way, the formula kicks in, and we receive about 6% of that, or $66,000 a year.
Okay.
But we don't even get all that. We get 90% of that because the funds don't come all in at once. They're, spread out over years because of appropriations for each year. So we get 90% of that, which is about $61,000 this year.
About $61,000, and that is just to replace money that we would typically have collected and we're not.
Right. Right.
Property tax ad valorem money is a piece of our general budget. It's funds that run into our general budget that we use to buy textbooks, we pay teacher salaries out of that, transportation, anything that we ought to choose to run school. So that money is not directed towards just low-income students nor Native American students.
Right.
Is that correct?
Correct. The money comes in to the district and they put it into the general fund for the benefit of all the students. Ponca City, looking at the voucher for last year, they spend over $5,000 per pupil here in this district. But when you count the impact aid money, how much that is per student that we count, it's only like $350 per student that we count. So there's still a $4,800 gap into what we spend and what we get in impact aid on those students.
Okay. So impact aid, in a nutshell, is money to help make up for money that we should have collected through property taxes ad valorem that we're not. So it's a way to make up to any school district, all school districts. I assume this is in all 50 states, impact aid?
It's not in all 50 because some people have been falling off because there's a certain percentage of your population you have to meet certain criteria or you can't qualify.
But Oklahoma is one that does
Right,
that.
right.
So many districts do get impact aid money here in Oklahoma. So that money just goes in the general fund because it's to replace property taxes not being paid. Okay, another piece of what you do, Chris, or the huge piece of what you do, is Title VII Director. Tell us what Title VII is.
Title VII is another federal program. It's a Indian education program. It is historically created to close those gaps that Indian children face in non-Indian schools or in school. It's primarily just to increase their success rate in academics, but also realizing that there are cultural differences in teaching Native American students and making sure that those cultural differences and those needs are met as well.
Okay, so about how many students have you identified as Native American in our district?
This year, our head count was 1,150 kids in the district, or more than 20% of our population.
More than 20%, that's pretty big.
It's a large, and there are even more, but we
group.
just don't have the form on file for them. We try to get them, we have a 30-day count
Yes.
window, and we try to gather as many of those forms as we can. And there's
Okay.
still some we don't get in.
And what do you do as Title VII Director? I know that you have several staff members. What are your goals with the students? What do you hope to achieve?
We have a staff of 8 members who work with the students on a daily basis. They're full-time at the school. They tutor them in math and reading and other subjects that they need help in, but also enrichment activities to promote their culture and their understanding of who they are. And they have been making progress in the last few years, bringing up all their test scores. Our graduation rate has increased, as well as our number of graduates. And they're just making a huge impact just because our budget has increased because of those things I just mentioned. Our head count has gone up and our grades have gone up, so we're able to get more money into the district and use that money to fund more programs and more staff members.
Okay. So it's a very valuable program, reaches about 20% of our students. How do you communicate with parents? I know that's been a concern. It's been in the newspaper. How is it that you communicate with parents of Title VII students?
Well, in the past, we've always, made telephone calls and sent letters home and made home visits. But in more recent times, in the last 3 or 4 years, we've sent newsletters home. Each site creates their own newsletter, and they send it home. The little kids, they go home with their weekly folders, the elementary students. The higher grade kids, there's a pickup point where they can pick up their newsletters and take them home. They're held to be a little more responsible for doing that since they are older. But I think what we're going to do in the future, just to make sure that everybody gets one, is we're going to make sure that everybody knows where they're located and ask them if they have it and follow those up with phone calls.
Okay, well, thank you, Chris. Is there anything else you'd like to share about Title VII?
No, I just think the program is a valuable program in this district, and I know a lot of kids are receiving assistance from that program. A lot of students have stepped up and just been more proud of who they are, and you can see it in the way they carry themselves in the schools, and I'm happy to be part of that program.
Well, thank you. You do a great job.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.